Hi you guys, we recorded a great podcast episode this morning with Peter Sage. For those of you who don't know who he is, he's a serial entrepreneur and business coach. We personally went to his business event in 2016 and we got so much value from it. He spoke alongside Richard Branson, Bill Clinton. He's a great speaker, so much to share on personal development, mindset. We spoke about levels of consciousness, quantum physics, so loads of cool stuff here to check out. He's got so much knowledge, so I really encourage you to go and check that out.
Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. It means a hell of a lot. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Cheers. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Infinite Potential podcast. Today we've got Peter Sage. He has been a big inspiration to myself and also co-host Ross Wood here for a number of years now. We went to his business school a couple of years ago. Peter, thanks a lot for joining us.
No, pleasure's mine, gentlemen. It's always good to connect with fans and students of the work.
Yeah, cool. So for people who don't know who you are, can you just go over a brief background of who you are and what you've done?
The whole self-promotion bit. There we are. Well, to be honest, one of the things I normally always start off with is the fact that, while, resumes and CVs can, really be a good sales pitch, everybody's pretty much, similar underneath. We all come from the same place. We're all got the same fears. And, I'm no more special than anybody else. I may have some experience that other people haven't had the opportunity to have yet. But generally speaking, my background is not special. I dropped out of school at 16. I've got no formal qualifications. I started my first business at 17. I'd always had an entrepreneurial flair. And since then, built many companies. And some have failed miserably. Some have been great success stories. And really just enjoyed the ride. And along with that, tried my best to get into personal growth and development. Initially because I wanted to be better so I could show everybody I was better. and then really I think a journey that a lot of people make is you kind of grow out of that ego-based stuff and really come full circle to wanting to grow so that you can contribute, not prove. And that's kind of where I find myself these days.
Wonderful, wonderful. You've had a bit of a difficult, maybe the last 12, 18 months. Do you want to talk through that?
I've had a fabulous last
there you go, yeah.
months to be completed that. Well, one of the best adventures I've had. I mean, dive straight in. Yeah, I this time almost exactly a year ago to the day, would you believe? I got sentenced to serve 6 months in one of the toughest prisons in the UK, Pentonville, which as a civil prisoner, which again I didn't see coming. I was arguing the toss in court with what I felt was a bully boy, big firm that had more money than I did and was trying to squeeze. And kicked back and tripped myself up in contempt of court, and found myself taking a 6-month field trip to shoot the prison scene of the movie of my life. And what a bend in the river that was. Fascinating adventure, one I don't regret a second of. One that had some good lessons for me as well, certainly around ego to begin with, but also gave me an opportunity to really see a side of life I never thought I'd have the opportunity to see. And also work with some people that would never have had, I believe, the opportunity to have access to the kind of material and things that I could bring in. So it was a real win-win in many respects. It gave me 6 months off on an unplanned vacation without any interruptions, phone calls and emails, which I think some people dream about these days. Allowed me to meditate for several hours a day, which I've been trying to get back to for the last 4 or 5 years, apart from my morning routine. Lots of different aspects to that. Came out about 6 months ago, and since then things have just been fabulous.
Yeah, wonderful. You mentioned morning routine there, Peter, and in the Western world now, it's a big thing, especially in personal development and growth and development. Morning routine is a big thing, and it can really set the day off either in the right way or the wrong way. Could you just tell our viewers out there a little bit about your morning routine and how it sets you up for the day?
Sure. Well, let's start by saying what the wrong way is. Yeah. Alarm goes off. Reach for your phone. And case closed, right? That's it. Everything's downhill. Forget it. You know? Why? Because, and for several reasons, you know, if you are waking up and the first thing that you're doing is triggering yourself to react to something external that you ultimately have no control over, then you are training yourself to be either a victim to circumstance or a walking doorbell for somebody else's agenda. And neither of those two have a happy ending when it comes to fulfillment and being able to give the best of who you are to the world. So yeah, the first thing that I do is, I don't have a sound alarm. I have a light alarm, especially this time of year in England when it's dark until pretty much midday. Yeah. So I set my alarm. I'm a 5 a.m. or before guy, and I have one of those natural sunrise alarms that luckily doesn't wake up Thea, because she's not really a 5 a.m. girl as such. Although she's been doing well. She's more of a she's getting there about 6 a.m. these days.
A morning zombie.
Yeah, there you go. But so the light naturally wakes me up. It essentially cuts your melatonin levels, increases serotonin levels, and your body will naturally respond to that. And so I wake up, and it's not one of those deer in the darkness kind of looks. I'm out, I'm up. I drink a pint of water, probably with some lemon juice, side of the bed, flush the body through. I go downstairs, and I have a meditation room. Now, you don't need a room to meditate. You can have a corner, you can have a desk, you can have a seat on a bus. Depending on where you're at. But I have a special place in my home that I do set aside, which is purely for me to be able to focus and shut out the rest of the world. And so my morning routine, I'll go down, I'll hydrate, I'll rebound, the little mini trampolines, just to get the lymph going, just to sort of wake up so I don't sort of fall asleep when I'm trying to meditate. This morning I was reading first, not the Jack Reacher novel or the latest, whatever it is, but some level of personal spiritual growth. And I'll journal. My journal is my private conversation with myself. And I'll obviously sit and connect to point consciousness, which is essentially the quantum field, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. The point where you essentially transcend the analytical mind, or to give a more accurate definition from my side, you disassociate your levels of identity with your mind and body, because you're far more than your mind and body. So, but very few people, when you're hooked into the physical world, where your data stream that's coming into your consciousness is predominantly physical and mental stimuli, it really anchors people into a false sense of identity, of thinking that they are their mind and body rather than they have a body. Biking in the park the other week, and it was icy, and I fell over and with the dogs and picked myself up, and when I got home I was covered in blood, and my fiance Thea, she's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" I'm like, "Well, honey, I'm fine. The car got a bit scratched. The vehicle got a bit scratched, but the driver's fine." And a lot of people forget that. If I was to cut off your arm, you wouldn't lose 15% of your personality or your memories or your dreams or your hopes or your vocabulary. Who you are is a lot more than your body. Same with the mind. Who you are when you feel most alive is when the mind is shut up. You're staring at the sunset, or you're making love to your partner, or there's an essence there where the mind is just silent. That's really the point of my morning routine, is to connect to that level of actualization where I realize experientially, not in the chatterings of my mind, where I realize experientially that I am so much more than the game that we believe we're set up to, the mind and the body. And that's really it. And as long as I can connect to that, and when I'm at that level of connection, set my intentions for the day, for my future, then I walk out, I'm calm, I'm centered, I've got more energy because my energy field is activated. And I go hit the gym, and that'll either be yoga, or it'll be weights, or maybe take the dogs for a run. Some level of where I get to use the body, I get to put the foot down in the gas on the car. I get to use it for what it is. And I come back, I'll hydrate, I'll juice, and shower and all of that kind of stuff. So by 9 o'clock, now that's 4 hours. That's half a working day for some people. But my mind, my body, my spirit, energy, everything is just like, okay, let's play. And at that point, I may reach for my phone.
Then you start scrolling, huh? Well, in the last 100 or so years, as you've mentioned there, science has just exploded, and everything they thought they did know is no longer probably relevant in comparison to what it was. But the truth is the truth, and essentially nothing is new under the sun, as the saying goes. Things such as remote viewing and astral projection and things like that, as you've mentioned there, that your body's simply a vehicle to carry who you are, your real self. You haven't obviously been doing this all of your life. This must have come into your consciousness, if you like, at a certain point. Was there a trigger point at any point that was like, yeah, there's more to this?
All of my life, or all of my lifetimes?
Well, there you go. You've got, depends how far you go, yeah.
Well, let's just say on this time around, and I tend to use various different metaphors because it makes it easy to relate to. We live in a fractal, based universe, which means that, we're a product of the product. And so it's no surprise to me that, we invented or came up with or created things like, theatre, from 2000 years ago, which morphed at the beginning of the last century into sort of movies. And so, I see life as a movie, and, as actors in that movie, we get to choose a script before we come and decide what we want to act with a view of trying to increase our acting ability, which is ultimately how do we become higher expressions of love. And, there's certain times where, there's scenes in the movie that are hard and scenes in the movie that are designed to be tough and, to stretch that ability. And so for me, we may work together as actors do on this particular movie. And, at the end of this particular movie that I'm starring in, called The Movie of My Life, I check out and I go back to where I was, not in front of the camera now and behind the camera. And, next movie, I decided to make a script. I may act with some of the same actors or actresses that I acted with before. You never know. Right? But for me, when it comes to understanding, science and where we go and what triggered me, I think it's inbuilt a thirst for knowledge. And again, not just at our DNA level, because just humanity at a physical level, an encoding level. You go back 30,000 years and, we were mesmerized by everything. Why did the moon change shape? Why did the ocean run away and why did it come back? What happened when it rained? Who was upset when it thundered? All of these questions, we've got this consummate yearning for answers. Now, on the flip side to that, it's been a benefit. It's allowed us to progress through our comfort zones to want to explore more. Man is the consummate level of explorer. On the downside to that, on the two-edged sword, it means that most people are seeking certainty and don't know how to live in the space of a question. And the truth is, as you say, there's only one truth, but the truth is we don't know the truth. So let's be okay about that. We can only give an approximation as to what feels right, regardless of how many scientific boxes it ticks at the moment, to be superseded or invalidated by the next series of boxes in the next moment. And so, we look at models. Models are useful to make sense and comprehend our world around us so that we can have a relationship with it that kind of makes sense. And if you look at traditional science on the Newtonian physics model, it makes a lot of sense for understanding the rule sets as to how our physical world and universe operates. And we have three main branches of science that govern that, which is physics, chemistry, and biology. And those three aspects of science, we've essentially reverse engineered through observation. It's like standing in the center of a giant Swiss watch and looking around at all the moving pieces and trying to figure out patterns and figure out how and what works. And we've done a very good job of that. We know how the cogs move to the precision that we can forecast where the moon's going to be 200 years from now. But why the watch is there, who built it, and its relationship to time and all of that stuff, that's a whole different aspect. So when traditional science talks about, that's unproven. Well, of course it's unproven because the domain of the physical universe is only subject to interpretation through data that can be interpreted through the physical senses. And what did Einstein say? What was his most famous equation? E equals mc squared. What does that essentially mean? Nothing that we know of can travel faster than the speed of light. 186,282.4 miles a second. Pretty quick. And if you do travel faster than that, you cannot be matter. So therefore, you have to transcend matter. You have to go to the quantum field. And the quantum level of science, which really sort of came to the forefront in 1929, was thrown a real cat amongst the pigeons of the traditional materialist Newtonian physicists, who unfortunately, less so now as we move forward, but unfortunately, traditionally over the last several decades, have been far more addicted to their identity as materialists because they have several years vested in a certificate on the wall and an identity that gives them significance, than they have open-mindedness, which is what science really should be about. So if you've got any questions to ask on the whole dichotomy around that, I'd be happy to share some light.
Well, go ahead. I mean, do you know Rupert Sheldrake? You might have heard. You might know the
Morphogenic fields.
Yeah, and studied that stuff and everything. I think there is scientists now that are much more open-minded, as you say. But
the main aspect here is because science is progressing at such a level where it's hard to invalidate the latest levels of awareness. Right? You could have swept them under the carpet before. You know, if something happens once, it's an incident. If it happens twice, it's a coincidence. But if it happens repeatedly, then there's a pattern that's governed by laws, and those laws are subject to investigation. And to dismiss it by saying, oh, well, spontaneous remission, that's just something that happens, right? Or the placebo effect, we can't explain it. Well, you still have to include it in legislature so you can benchmark a freaking drug against it. You know, so it exists, but, you know, we don't want to talk about it because it doesn't fit our model. Right. So, yeah, there's less scientists now that are starting to understand that, whoa, hang on a minute, we can't really defend our materialist-based model at the minute. It works for what it is. You know, the flat earth model still works when you're designing houses, right? It's useful. You know, it serves a purpose. You don't want to use, you know, the curvature of the earth, you know, when you're designing houses. If you're picking a geodesic flight orbit from getting from London to New York, then you don't want to use the flat earth model, right? Yeah, you'll end up over the ocean.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's
discussions about that in the past. I've said, use your senses, man. That Earth's flat. Nah, it's not.
And to be fair, don't get me started on that because I'll burst too many bubbles. Right? But ultimately, what we're leading to as a conclusion here, guys, is the understanding of two fundamental principles that science really needs to and is waking up to, depending on the level of progressiveness and level of consciousness of the scientist. One is this. The material-based universe that we've put all of our attention on is a subset of something larger. Yeah. The superset that governs the subset that we would know as the quantum field, or time-space rather than space-time, has a very different set of characteristics. And therefore, and there are some are similar, just like, you know, the child will have certain characteristics of the parent. But the superset is the governing field. Einstein said it himself. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle, not the other way around. So when you can understand that, hang on a minute, yes, those things that we talk about, remote viewing and astral projection and, you know, spontaneous healing and spooky action at a distance, as Einstein labeled it initially, are perfectly normal when you understand the role that the superset plays as opposed to the subset. But trying to reverse engineer the rule set of the superset from the subset, you're going to bang your head against a wall. That's why Einstein couldn't, in the last 17 years of his life, figure out how to make it work. He hadn't got the model. He just knew that it couldn't, you know, consciousness, which was the primary driver, had to be part of the superset and couldn't be explained as part of the subset, which is where biologists and traditional scientists are still banging their head against a wall because they think it's a biological byproduct of brain function. And it isn't. Consciousness is primary. You know, so we could get into that argument all day and night. I'm sure it's not the only reason you asked me to come on here today, but as you can tell, it's a bit of a passion on one of the subjects I love to chat.
Yeah. So just quickly, while we're on that topic, we had a chat not long ago whether truth is subjective or objective, or is there like an underlying fundamental truth, or is everything just constantly evolving and redesigning models and etc. What's your take on that?
I think you're getting confused between two fundamental issues. One is what we would call truth with a capital T.
Yeah.
And the truth with the capital T is what is. Yeah. However, you will never be able to understand what is because the only thing you will ever be able to do is comprehend your interpretation of what is.
Makes sense.
So therefore, truth, as close you could ever know it, will always be subjective. Because even if the objective truth is out there, you can only know it subjectively. Yeah. So the argument is somewhat flawed in a way. If we understand the only thing that we can do as human beings in this experience of, you know, third dimensional reality on, you know, what we label as planet Earth in this, you know, in this game, the only thing that we could ever do is experience. That's it. That's all consciousness can do. Yeah. Consciousness can only experience. Now, if you want to take it a stage further, the only thing it can experience is the act of experiencing.
Yeah.
So everything there is subjective based upon the individual's own experience of consciousness, which is going to be different for, you know, the other 7.5 billion people. So, you know, that's what I said. The truth with a capital T, if people are willing to let go of their addiction to certainty, is that we don't know the truth. And that's about as close as you're going to get. and being okay with that, because then you're not chasing some big dream that, you know, is usually dangled up because people can't handle the void of uncertainty, or they're chasing its significance because they want a PhD and a Nobel Prize in figuring out the game. Right? So once you can let go of understanding that there is no big truth to chase after, you can focus on something far more important, which is your own personal truth.
Yeah.
Why are you here? Why did you show up? Why did you choose this particular movie script to act in?
Yeah.
Now, what role are you contributing to this film versus running around trying to figure out why the producer and the director set it up in the first place? That's not your business. That's a wild goose chase. Go sit on a mountaintop for 20 years and meditate and see how much closer you get.
Yeah.
What you'll hopefully do is get to the realization that, you know, your truth is far more important than running around chasing a ghost.
Yeah, definitely. What I'd say there is there's a lot of people, especially in my social circle as well, that they don't seem to be happy doing the 9-to-5 job or whatever it is they're doing. They know there's something greater out there for them, or they could be out there serving to a high degree, but they haven't quite figured it out yet.
Mm-hmm.
And how important is it to have that dream? And have you got any tips on the viewers out there, how they can, the first stages into finding out that dream, and how they can serve others to a higher level and breaking out of the typical societal industrial age revolution?
Sure. And yeah, again, one has to understand that some people are perfectly happy to, you know, work 9 to 5 and that's their job. I mean, they probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast, in all fairness. Or they may be guided to it because the timing is right for them to listen to a deeper voice. You know, I'm a born entrepreneur, so I'm a big believer that, you know, my reference point is that everybody should captain their own ship. Well, everybody is captaining their own ship. It's just, you know, are you part of a corporate fleet? So if you have that inner voice that says, dude, you know, why am I waking up to do something I don't like? I mean, that's your feedback.
Yeah,
it's what I call the rumble strip. You know, if you're driving down the motorway or the freeway and you've got some, you know, white lines that hopefully keep you safe. But if you kind of lose track and you drift off and you're listening to your music and you kind of tune out and you start veering to one side, at some point you're going to cross the rumble strip, and it's going to design to wake you up, and it's good. And here's the challenge: some people get annoyed at that because it interferes with their music. They're like, what's that doing now? Let me turn the music down. Now that music, that rumble strip may be, saying, oi, this is a warning, and we're going to get a little louder. And if you don't listen to me soon, we're going to fall off the verge. That could be a mild heart attack rumble strip. It could be your second divorce rumble strip. Your kids are on drugs rumble strip. It could be the fact that, you just got that pit in your stomach that says, why the frick am I still doing this job when I don't like it?
The body doesn't lie.
Because you need to be honest with yourself. You're scared.
Yeah.
It's the only reason. You're scared because you don't know what the alternative means, and you don't know how to live in the space of that question. Because if you did and you were happy with it, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now. So ultimately, the rumble strip is beautiful. It's like, hey, dude, wake up.
Yeah.
If you don't start steering the ship a little closer or the car a little closer to the center of the road, you're going to have some problems. And life is designed to look after you. But sometimes, again, use another metaphor, personal trainer. If you hire a personal trainer, you know that, especially if it's an expensive personal trainer, you want to be throwing up at the end of the session or you want your money back, right? That's, you want your ass kicked. That's why people do it. Well, life is your personal trainer. Now, the personal trainer doesn't do it because he's a sadist. He doesn't get a kick out of, watching you throw up on the treadmill. Right? He's there because he cares about you. He cares because his job is to push you past the limitations of your mind that gives up at the first sign of insecurity or self-talk that says, I can't do it.
Yeah.
He's there to believe in you more than you believe in you until you believe in you. Life is the same. If we see life as our personal trainer, if we see life as somebody who cares about us, as somebody that loves us to the point where they believes in us more than we believe in ourselves, then we can understand that when we're screaming because we've lost our job, our wife's walked out, we've been ripped off, or whatever it is, that's just the weight on the bar. And if we don't think we can lift it, right, it's because we're looking at it from the wrong perspective. If you're busting out that last rep and your biceps are screaming, and if you go to the perspective of the muscle fiber, they're looking up saying, dude, what are you doing? I'm breaking down. You're killing me here. You're ripping me apart, literally. Stop, for God's sake, right? But if you chunk up to the position of you're looking down, you're trying your best to bust that last rep out. You feel proud when you've done it. If you go to the point of the personal trainer, they're saying, come on, you can do this. I know you can do it. Come on, just one more, right? And then one more again, because I still believe it, yeah? So when stuff's kicking off in our life, where are we? Are we at the muscle fiber? Yeah. Are we at the athlete? Or are we at the trainer level? So everything's a different perspective. But ultimately, one of them is a victim mentality and the others aren't.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, we just don't have the context for understanding adversity to allow us to grow at the level that we want to grow. So, when it comes down to sitting there and saying, I hate my job, well, you can sit there and look at the weights in the gym all you want. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to continue to gain weight. Or you can say, something? I know I'm going to get sore. That's part of the growth process. I know that it's going to feel uncomfortable at times, but something? I'm a born athlete, not a born fast food dumpster. So, let's throw my hat in the ring here and go swing the bat, because what's the worst that can happen? We live in a society in a time in history where you can't even starve to death.
Yeah.
So the fear of letting go of what you think you have for going forward to get what you think is possible is probably the ultimate skill set that somebody can develop. How do you do that? Recognize there's no certainty in life. You're here to play the game.
Yeah.
If you believe it takes care of you, then you've got an advantage.
Yeah. I mean, you can be addicted the other way, though. You can be addicted to uncertainty as well, can't you?
Well, I think you're talking about things like adrenaline and...
Yeah. You
know,
need that in order to feel worthy and whatever else.
Yeah, defining yourself by conquering the odds is a game that I played for quite a while. And it was an early adoption of people used to see me as Wonder Boy. I was in my 20s and, I was building companies and driving fast cars and, doing well. And I was just me. I was still insecure. I thought I needed, another Ferrari to prove it and all the rest of it. But I thought if anyone ever finds out I'm just a guy and I'm not a superhero, crap. So I better work hard at trying to maintain that. And then life tends to lose its edge, because then you go and talk to your friends down the pub and they're talking about, who's got talent and all that kind of crap. And it's just no interest. So you're looking for things that push the envelope. So what do? You start jumping out of airplanes. You start climbing tall mountains. You start looking for that next level of validation as to who you are through something external that you can define yourself with that's separate from other people to maintain that illusion of significance. And then what happens? You realize that it's not there either. And hopefully you learn that before, your reserve chute fails. Right? So then you start on this understanding of spiritual development, hopefully. Some people go to their grave not quite getting that lesson yet. Yeah. But then you realize that life's about growth and contribution, not about, trying to cover up insecurities and looking good.
Yeah. What do you think that is? There's so many people that are so focused on the external world and really find it a struggle just to look within themselves at their own patterns of behavior and make a change.
Because it scares the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Right? The outer world I can deal with if I'm an achiever. The inner world, I've got nowhere to hide. And it means addressing things on terms that I've spent my entire life creating defenses against. Vulnerability, self-honesty, not being good enough, the emotions people don't want to include. And again, the word there is to include, not avoid.
Yeah.
Once you're okay at including the emotion of not good enough, you have the right to go through it to become good enough. Yeah. Once you're okay being fat, you can choose to be thin.
Yeah.
But when you resist everything in the outer world, you will be fighting a battle with yourself until the end of the game. So when you can stand in front of a crowd, completely petrified, and be vulnerable enough to be judged, then you're starting on the road to be a great speaker. But if you try to polish everything up and do all your Toastmaster stuff and walk out there and you're addicted to the good opinion of others and you're trying to do everything to manipulate that, rather than just let it all go and be who the hell you are. People say, oh, well, Happy New Year. This is the new you. Well, the new you means that, the old you sucked. And most people don't like that because they're still them. I much rather call it a real you.
Yeah.
Now, this year's about the authentic you. It's about the you that always was there, that was scared to come out because you're defining your identity by somebody else's opinion. Growing out of that is one of the first steps to emotional maturity.
Yeah, I think that's massive.
Yeah, you've mentioned quite a lot in the last half hour about like victim mindset and stuff. Can we lead into like Dr. David Hawkins' work and his levels of awareness? Do you want to talk about your 4 levels that you go through in your courses?
Yes, I mean the late great Dr. Hawkins in Power versus Force delineated 17 levels of consciousness that is really a sublime map for understanding that which science calls nebulous. And I think the greatest contribution that he made was really understanding that these levels are frequencies. These levels are actually independent of people, but we tune into them like a radio frequency. It's like kind of what song are you listening to and playing? What beat are you tapping your feet to? Because it governs everything about who you are and how you act, what your beliefs are, what thoughts arise, everything. Now, 17 levels is a little bit complicated for most people because the brain tends to count 1, 2, 3, many. So I chunked it down into 4 levels to make it easier to understand. And because consciousness is something that, again, it's so nebulous if you don't know how to have a context for it. And when you understand how primary consciousness is, it's everything. It's first. Remember, the only thing you can do is experience through the act of consciousness. That's it. That's all you're ever doing. Everything else after that is noise and labeling. So when we have an understanding for it, it allows us to make a bit more sense of it, as I said earlier about the power of models. So if you look at the fact that I have a stage that I call to me, and it's the victim mentality, where everything happens to me, essentially characterized by blame, essentially characterized by pointing the finger outward. It's not my fault. The avoidance of personal responsibility at all costs, the moaning at life because you feel you're under the illusion that it owes you a living. You're the hypochondriac, you're unlucky. It's all of that stuff. And if it wasn't for so-and-so, then this would be different.
Are we looking at 90% of the population here? What are we looking at?
No, it depends on which part of the world, to be fair, culturally. I think I think personally, you're probably looking at about 70%. Yeah, I think the new generation, since the indigos started coming through from the 70s en masse, I think there's a lot of more progressive thinking. Everybody can feel a shift in levels of consciousness as technology allows messages like what you guys are delivering to become more mainstream, which is beautiful. So, but victim mentality is still a huge pastime for many people, because the alternative is to look in the mirror and say it's my fault, and most people can't do that. Why? Because they can't include the fear that they're not enough. Yeah. So moving forward to that, you realize that there's a bit more to life than sitting there and taking all the knocks. So you start really getting into a point where you take charge and responsibility. And that's what I call by me. You're in the achiever mode. It's going to happen by me, because to me sucks. Yeah. And therefore you start getting out and making stuff happen. But the challenge with by me is it operates at a material basis. In other words, you're working on matter to matter. You're trying to grab the world, the physical world, by its throat, bend it into shape. And the best analogy I can give you there is like Lego bricks. Before Lego bricks are made, they exist in a liquid form, a molten liquid. And you can choose what color, what dye, and you can make any Lego brick you want out of that. And that goes into let's call it the Lego oven, and it comes out in its mold, and it's solid. Now, that outer world, if you like, where the bricks appear, is what we call the physical universe. Now, what most people do is they get a red-yellow brick that's 6 blocks long in front of them, and they didn't want that. They want their life to have a yellow Lego brick that's 2 blocks long. So what do? They try to bend it into shape. They try to cut it, try to color it. They get a pen, they start coloring it, and they start twisting it. It's a lot of effort to change matter to matter, but it's how most people work, and they grab the world by its throat. And I can guarantee you, go grab somebody by their throat, and what's their natural reaction? They resist. Yeah. Resist. I would. Right? So the world resists most people's attempts to control it. But if your frame of reference at a material-based level is matter to matter, I'm sorry, man, you're going to be swimming upstream. And you may have the tenacity, the energy, the wherewithal, the persistence to bend that branch back as far as you can. But what happens the second you let go? Slaps you back in the face. And I think we've all played that game. Yeah. So there is another level, and the other level is understanding, again, at the highest levels of understanding in the quantum world right now, is that all matter is preceded by non-matter. All matter arises out of non-matter. The essence of what we think matter is an illusion. We know that. How do we know it? Go measure it. You go take a little GoPro, shrink it down into a subatomic size, and go spin it around inside of an atom and take some pictures and see what comes back. Oh, nothing. There's nothing there. It's an illusion. Just like right now, you're watching me on a screen. If this was 200 years ago, and this was a 4K high-def television, and you'd bought somebody from 200 years and standing 10 feet away, and they'd think I was living inside of that. Yeah, it'd be totally real. Because all of their senses would give them that data. Just like our senses give us data around us. But let's get a bit closer. We get a little closer, and we tap, and we realize, oh, it's not actually 3D. It's not real, is it? It's glass. And then we get closer, and we realize it's not really glass, it's pixels. Then we go further and realize it's not even pixels, it's 3 LEDs firing in a very coordinated, intelligent sequence. Then we go further and realize it's nothing but photons. So then when you zoom back out, it looks real. You zoom in, it's not real. It's the same for the physical world. How do I demonstrate that? Simple. Now let's take your arm. You stand back, it looks like an arm. You get close, you realize it's not an arm at all. It's actually made up of millions of pixels called skin cells. And you zoom in, you realize that, well, no, actually, it's not skin cells. Each one has millions upon millions of molecules. And you go even further, and you realize these molecules are made up of millions of atoms. You go even further, and you realize that, what's that? Nothing. Energy. Condensed light slowed into fixed patterns that we perceive to be matter, if you want to quote Einstein again. So, what is real? Nothing is real in the sense of the label that we give it. Right? So if you can go to the Lego factory and you can learn how to tell them what bricks you want and allow that to pattern its way through the oven and come out the other side, that's a lot easier game than bitching about the bricks that you're there because you didn't think you ordered them and try to saw them in half and bend them into shape. So through me is the next level of consciousness. Through me is where you recognize that the material world is the aftermath. It's the subset. So then how do you start talking to the superset? That's where meditation comes in. That's where you quieten the mind. You quieten the data stream that's coming in through the physical senses, which is why you close your eyes and you sit in a quiet room. But then the challenge with that is that it amplifies the mental sense. Just like, you get a girl that, wants to have an heightened intimate experience and, you put a blindfold on and guess what happens? Why do people do that? Because it amplifies the other senses when you take one away. Well, look at meditation. You take the physical senses away. What's most people's biggest problem? Mental channel. Suddenly pipes up.
Thoughts.
So you have to learn how to disconnect the data stream, not only the physical one, but the mental one. That's where most people struggle. But once you do that, you're connecting to a quantum field. And at that quantum field, you can then use something which science doesn't really have an explanation for. We have a label, a mind label for it. We call it intention. And we can then project that intention energetically into the field. And we found out, lo and behold, at every level of scientific validation, that we can influence what shows up in the material world through our intention in the non-material world. Well, what do you know about that? Co-creators with the creator. In other words, we get to influence the ingredients in the recipe and have somewhat of a say in what comes out of the oven. Wow. Where does that awareness live in to me mode or by me mode? Doesn't. So that's through me. That's really where life is a lot more flowing. Now, that doesn't mean to say that now I can just create whatever I want, because a lot of the ego will jump up then and start creating shit for its own purpose and not for why we're here, which is to contribute at high levels of love. Yeah. And so you'll still get slaps and knockbacks. Right? If you suddenly learn how to cook and all you want to do is bake cakes and eat them, that's not conducive to a healthy lifestyle. Right? So you'll get a lot of feedback from the quantum field as to whether your creations serve you or they don't. And it's nice to have a bit of cake once in a while. It's not averse to that. Yeah. But what are you really here for? And then if you transcend higher levels of consciousness, using Hawking's model from sort of 600 plus, where duality dissolves into the sort of 700s to 1000s, you hit what's called ASME, which is where you realize that there is no separation. You become oneness, as the spiritual sort of term that's doing the rounds kind of describes it as. Yeah. So we go from separation back to unity. Through that field, and the ultimate sense of separation is at victim mode, because now everything's happening to you. So some sort of partner mode where you try to figure it out. You get into sort of by me mode where you're controlling everything, very forceful, or you move into sort of a homeostasis where you're working with and part of and through the quantum field, right up to realizing, well, there is nothing really to actualize because it's all part of who you are anyway.
Yeah. I think the motivational industry as a whole sort of grabs people by the scruff of the neck from the victim and drags them up into, I can create something for myself. But I just think there was something missing to sort of take the people who are ready up to that next step. And I think that's why I was resonated with your message, was because there was something more than, I don't know, I'd talk about anybody else or whatever, but something a bit more on top of just the standard motivational bullshit, if for the lack of a better term. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And
standard motivational bullshit is useful at some levels.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and one has to appreciate that, just like the levels of consciousness, one isn't better than the other. That's spiritual ego talking.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What's better or what's more significant, a 15-year-old or a 10-year-old?
Nothing.
They're just different stages of development along their own evolutionary timeline. Now, we get that on a physical basis. So let's go over to a spiritual, emotional basis. What's better? Somebody who's in victim mode or somebody who's in through me mode? Right? Well, neither's better. They're just representative of different stages of their own evolutionary journey. Buddha wasn't born enlightened. He went through his journey. So to understand that everybody's where they're at and they're perfectly where they're at. And it may not be this lifetime that they get to go to where you're at, or vice versa. And that's okay. We're all here starring in the movie of our life on our acting scene. If I'm acting in a movie with Brad Pitt, he's got more experience than I have. I don't get jealous about that. I say, what can I learn from that? And maybe one day, and if I've done as many movies as him, I'll get the Academy Award if that's the validation of where he thinks he needs to be, and all that stuff. It's different levels of understanding. So knowing that all I can do is focus on what's my truth. Why am I here? How can I express higher levels of personal growth and development for me? Now, if I'm in victim, then guess what? Motivation and desire is damn useful for getting my ass off the couch.
Yeah.
But one of the greatest lessons I took from Hawkins was understanding that desire is a level of consciousness. It's not an act, which means that if you're operating at that level of consciousness, no matter how many times you fulfill whatever desire it is, desire will always arise, which means you'll never get to the end point. Every goal will be replaced by another goal because it's not about desiring the goal. It's about being governed by the field of desire itself. So therefore, there's no end game. If you're listening to jazz and that's the station that's playing on the radio, then you're listening to jazz. Just because one song finishes, it doesn't mean that another song will arise, but I'm trapped into jazz. Now, if I can climb up the levels of awareness, desire has far less impact on me. Now it's about what I can contribute, not what I can get. So, and another big awareness is desire calibrates at 125, which means it's inherently non-integrous and it's inherently forceful, and it makes total sense. Why? And for those listening not aware, the tipping point at 200 is really what he was saying is the transference between a life where you're forcing things to happen or a life that starts to become more powerful. And 125 is fairly low on the totem pole. Why? Because desire starts with a presupposition that's false to begin with. And that is, I don't have, what it is that I need. And you already have everything you need. So knowing that desire is useful if you're in apathy, desire is useful. If you're in fear, you can desire to move forward. It contains more power than a lot of the lower levels of consciousness. So it can be very useful. Part of the progression. Teething is useful for a 2-year-old. It's not useful, when you got braces at 15. Right? So it's just recognizing that level of awareness. And so, from looking at the personal motivational field, where it does fall down is by trying to sell somebody a answer to their end game by leaving them in buy me. Right? Buy my course, take my this, read this book, do this practice, and your life will work out. Well, no, your life is already working out. Your life is perfect. If it sucks, that's called great feedback. If you oversalt the food in the kitchen of life, you can't complain the fact the food is salty. In fact, it's perfect. If you oversalted the food and it didn't taste salty, I'd get worried because I don't know how to work with that rule set. The kitchen in life has been perfectly stacked with the pots, the pans, the ingredients, and everything else you need. And if you sit on your backside and says, I'm hungry, if God loved me, he'd feed me. Well, no, God gave you a kitchen. Right? This food doesn't taste very nice. Well, we'll use that to learn and try to cook something different next time. Experiment, have fun.
Yeah.
I'm still hungry. Well, cook some more food. Everything's perfect. The feedback is perfect. Everybody I meet is an idiot. Well, maybe it isn't them.
Yeah.
It's life provides the most incredible feedback mechanism. And the reason most people don't like listening to that is because they don't like their life, and that would force them to take responsibility for it. You don't get it. I'm really unlucky. Everything would be great, if this hadn't happened. It clearly happened for a reason.
Why do you think that's the default mode? Is that from just history gone by?
Again, look at humanity historically. The levels of consciousness of humanity follows a similar timeline of a human body growing up. We've had to learn and evolve first as hunter-gatherers, or not even before that as barbarians, and then natives, and then moving forward into sort of civilization, and then evolving into different levels of understanding and politics, and so we've been growing. You go back 2,000 plus years to the time of Christ, and the average level of consciousness of humanity was at 100. Which is why it doesn't surprise me most of the religions came out from a fear-based mentality, a controlling-based mentality, a force-based mentality. The spiritual teachers themselves never had that approach. In fact, not one spiritual teacher ever said follow a book.
Yeah.
So, it's our interpretation based upon where humanity was at the time. That's why religion in the next 50 years will disappear. because no need for it. It served its purpose at the time to provide answers that people didn't understand from a level of explaining divinity. But the challenge was it could only be interpreted through the level of consciousness at the time, at the mass hysteria, which is why most of it is fear-based, controlling, suppressive, because God didn't create man in his image. Man created God in man's image, which is why it's anthropomorphic projections of, anger and fear and resentment and fire and brimstone, all that bullshit, which served its purpose at the time beautifully. It's just no longer needed now as we evolve.
Yeah,
I'll give you a contentious example, shall I?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Right. And I was thinking of putting a YouTube video out on this, actually. My team says, please don't. But, what the hell? I was going to put a video up to say why slavery is a good thing, right? And just to get a contentious response. Now, obviously, before we go any further, I don't subscribe to, or purport that slavery is a good thing at the moment. But again, before people get triggered and before, everybody's own model of the world gets, on autopilot with their projections and judgments, go look at human history. Every single country in the world historically has at some point in its development adopted slavery. And if you look at it from a more pulled back and objective perspective, it has been a sign of evolution. In other words, if you have a country that prior to that was usually the sort of hordes and barbarians, as it evolved into more civilized society, it started to recognize the fact that you could trade with people as commodities, but those people were, rather than used for food, they were used in service. Now, at some point, they grew out of that into not too long ago in the US, and still in some places today. I mean, you take the Middle East and a lot of places around there that still effectively have a slave-based attitude towards menial hire. Right. So, and I lived in the Middle East for 6 years and I experienced that firsthand. But if you have a look at it historically, it's a good sign of progress that a company is evolving through from one phase to another. Just like nappies on a baby, or a baby's ability to use a potty, right? It goes from having to wear nappies and crapping itself to learning how to use a potty. That's a good sign because it's showing an evolution. Now, when you're 25 years old, you think you'd use a toilet and not a potty, right? But it shows you it's a mark of evolution. It's a necessary phase that goes through. Now, if the baby never got to the potty stage, then there's something, you're going to have a problem. Yeah. So looking at slavery as a classic example, as a contentious example, so if people can understand this, then they can unhook from their immediate judgments. It's actually a good thing to see that evolve through. Now, coming into modern day, again, you wouldn't want to go back to sitting on a potty, right? You need to understand slavery from the level of consciousness right now is completely unacceptable, right? It has no basis in society right now, just as nappies and potties have no basis in a boardroom. So if you look at the different aspects of levels of consciousness, religion served a purpose at the time for the phase that mankind was going through. But we've kind of evolved past that now, which is why most people are starting to, at the level of consciousness they're at, align far more to spiritual values, which is kind of religion without the rules and the punishments and the fear, and align more towards a love-based understanding of life and divinity, and awe and a wonder and an openness to possibility, not a subversive do as you're told, and if you don't pray 3 times a day, you're going to end up regretting it in the afterlife. So that's kind of my prediction. And again, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with potties.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with slavery. In its right context, it is a good thing to show a marker of evolution towards hopefully something that replaces it, that it's a higher level of value and consciousness and understanding. Make sense?
Yeah. So would you say, based on that then, the consciousness must be rising and falling cyclically based on that?
No, that's like saying that your chronological age rises and falls cyclically. No, it doesn't. It is as an average, as a general marker, it has been rising steadily since that point. The average consciousness of humanity right now is circa around about 210. Yeah, if you look at the latest calibrations. Yeah. So we've gone from 100 through and up and into the dark ages and through the middle ages and where we've arrived at now. And that's why you're starting to agree that there's far more of an awareness of people like yourselves that see things from a higher perspective. It's not about what we can take. That was the 80s on Wall Street. Now that happens, and we have protests. Now we start to look at what of the social disruption that's happening. A lot of these indigos are adults now. They're creating massive change in industries that have been essentially for decades doing things ineffectively, inefficiently, and from an egocentric, self-centered perspective. Whereas now you're seeing people disrupt industries with new technology that serves humanity at much higher levels. Why did Uber become so big? Easy. They built a better mousetrap. That's it. Yeah, they had the technology to be able to do it, but ultimately they provided a better service at a better price, and people weren't no longer get ripped off by unlicensed cabs and taxis that had it good for far too long. So it's evolution, and we know that's the basis of reality because you've got 400 million years of fossil records that validate it.
Yeah. I think where I was coming from is like the ancient Egyptians and that. If you actually dive into all that stuff, I'd probably argue that we're not as maybe spiritually as enlightened as we were then, as in comparison to what.
Now, I understand, but if you take the ancient Egyptians as a percentage of humanity, they were probably keeping at the higher end of the game. Yeah. So humanity as a whole has generally been rising.
Yeah. So you think like soul progression, if you like, across the board is just a continual ascension, if you like, spiritual ascension. Is that what you'd put?
I kind of see us here in Earth School.
Right.
And again, let's come back to fractals. There's no, surprise that we've invented a school system, over the last, several, millennia. If you look back, it's always followed a similar kind of theme, which could be a fractal of, the superset, if you like. Yeah. If we're here in Earth School and we're here to learn essentially how to choose love instead of fear over ever more challenging circumstances, which is my view, then, at the end of this particular term, we check out, we have our summer holidays, and we decide if we've taken our exams, did we pass or did we fail? If we pass, we get to go to the next year. Now, guess what? On the next year, we've evolved a little more. The questions are a little harder. They should be. And we have another exam at the end of that year. And if we fail that exam, guess what? We resit the year. If we pass the exam, we go to the next year. And guess what? The questions are harder, and they're meant to be. People say, oh, well, I don't like my life. Well, I don't like school. Well, the purpose of school is not for you to like school. That doesn't mean to say you can't like school. A lot of people love school, but it's not its purpose. The purpose of life is not to be happy. The purpose of life is to grow up so that you can become higher levels of expression of love, which, if you do, tends to lead to more happiness. But if you are here saying the purpose of life is to be happy, you've got the cart before the horse. The purpose of school is to provide an environment for you to take advantage of what's been positioned so that you can educate yourselves to high levels of awareness, right? Whether you do that, whether you show up to class, whether you put the work in, whether you get drunk every night, school doesn't care. School's there to provide the environment. You're there to make the choices, and you live with the consequences of those choices. Life is the same. Right? We're here in Earth School. Now, you can have a great time at school. There's sometimes where you can drink beer and have parties and take crack and all the usual crap that students tend to play with and all the rest of it. But that's not why you're there. It doesn't mean to say that we have to be miserable while we're learning to be spiritually immature. That's not the game. Yeah. You can have an amazing time. Some people love school. Some people resist it. But you need to understand it for what it is. School is designed to provide an environment that gives you the opportunity to avail of the resources it puts in place and the curriculum it offers, so that you can make choices to grow and evolve your awareness. Life is the same. Now, along that ride, you can have a blast. Along that time, there's going to be hard. Some of the exams are going to test you. You're not going to get every single question right. You're not designed to. If you are, you're in the wrong year. Yeah, that's the game. When people realize that, they understand that, then they've got a slightly different context, slightly different relationship to what's going on around them. You can relax a bit. You can chill out a bit. If you trust the system, then you can relax. Oh no, I need to get every exam right. Every question on my exam right. Well, that's not going to happen. Or you beat yourself up because you don't do it. Well, that's not useful. Strive for being the best you can. And if your pass mark's 50% and you hit 48, that's okay. You may have to resit some of the questions, and next time you get it better. It's all good.
Yeah, we've just passed the hour mark, Peter, so we'll start wrapping it up if you don't mind. Is that all right?
Cool.
If you had to recommend a book or text or something like that for people what would be the first piece of text that would come to your head?
Well, the first thing I'd do is I'd have to ask the question as to what their outcome is and where are they at. The first time I picked up Power versus Force, I put it down for 10 years.
Agreed, the same here, yeah.
It depends where you're at. That's like saying, which exam should I give the student? Well, it depends what year they're in school. Yeah, what essay should I recommend? Well, okay, let's walk into kindergarten and give them Shakespeare. That's a little out of their league, unless they can colour it in. Right? So it would be a case of give me a little bit more data points on who I'm talking to and what their outcome is. Let's say
the people that have sort of done a lot of personal development work and now sort of looking at that next level, what would your first book be?
Cool. Well, what I think you're talking about here is the transition, sort of that crossing point from by me to through me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge. That's where I tend to focus a lot. And another person that focuses there as well, which I'm a big fan of, and I quote some of his work, and I recommend him, and that's Joe Dispenza. Yeah, and to see Dr. Joe evolve over the last 10 plus years since What the Bleep has been a joy to watch. And he's in his prime right now. He's doing some of the latest, most cutting edge work in the fields of neuroscience and consciousness research. And so, check out Dr. Joe and his work. I'd certainly recommend, if they haven't already, the book Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. As a phenomenal book to pick up. That really starts to open people's minds to the fact that it's not just some sort of woo-woo, nebulous spiritual new age deal, but there's some science behind it. He does a very amazing job of being able to cultivate that level of awareness so people have a foundation on which their left brain can stand. And therefore take a leap, or a slightly bigger leap of faith into a field of awareness that normally their left brain would kick back against. So I love Joe as well. I've just done an advanced meditation retreat with him in Spain with 1,000 other people, and to see him doing what he's doing now has been a joy to watch. So recommend people like Dr. Joe. I'm a fan of Tom Campbell. I very much subscribe to the virtual reality model because it just fits a lot of the pictures in terms of understanding and context.
That's My Big Toe, isn't it?
Yeah, the My Big Toe. In fact, if you probably even see it on the shelf behind me somewhere.
It's a big, thick one. He puts the three.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Under Brownson, of course. But yeah, and I've read that cover to cover, and I think there's not a page on it that hasn't got notes. On there. So I love Tom's work. Tom's kind of like a grandfather energy, and if you're in tune with him, he's just so on point. I mean, I'm in awe of some of the phraseology. I mean, the ultimate master for me in terms of succinctness in expression of truth was Hawkins. You could read Hawkins a paragraph, and someone like me who's just not as good in terms of I'm way more verbose. I would spend 10 hours talking about what he can sum up in 4 lines. I'm like, wow, how does he do that? It's beautiful.
He collaborated his own work, didn't he? And they were all mid-900s, even above that, some of them, when he collaborated his own.
Well, Reality and Subjectivity, calibrated at 999.8. Stunning. And that was the third in his trilogy, with Power versus Force being the first, the Eye of the I being second, which calibrated at 980, I believe. Yeah. And I is just blew me away. It just honestly was stunning.
I was lying on a beach in Bali reading The Eye of the I, and I couldn't get off the beach. Your girlfriend was trying to, come on, we've got to, I said, I can't leave, can't go. I just couldn't put it down. And like for weeks after, you're just in a different place, from my experience.
It speaks volumes of where you're at, my friend.
Yeah, I couldn't focus. I think he even mentioned it himself in one of his books. He couldn't actually pull a cup out of the cupboard or something because his awareness was just so out there, And I mean, it's a shame that he's passed away because I'd have loved to have gone and seen him and stuff. But that's how it is, isn't it?
Friends of mine met him before he passed, but he served his purpose. And excuse one thing I remember when he was saying that at a certain level, usually around about the sort of 6 to 7, you can choose whether you want to stay or not. Yeah, because you've outgrown the class. But if you want to stay and come back as a teacher and stay in the material world, then great. But if you raise your frequency to a certain point, the body's immaterial. You've got no association to it. You've got no connection to it. It runs through its own level of stuff to be able to serve the full sets.
Where healing fits in as well. You can just stand in the presence of somebody and your knee gets better or whatever it is.
Well, if somebody has such a high level of vibration and such a high level of energy that they can direct that through intent. And like two radio stations close to each other, if one's got a bigger antenna, it's putting out a more amplified signal. It's going to interfere and overlay, and you're going to hear that song when you're trying to listen to the song on the smaller radio. So there's that kind of effect that happens. But there are some caveats. You need to be able to be receptive to that. Some people get far more out of their story about why they're sick, secondary gain, than they do, have the conscious and unconscious level of relinquishment to their story, because it gives up their identity. And one of the first things I say when I'm working with drug addicts or working with people with long-term sort of conditions is, who are you without your problem? Because the second the identity gets connected to it, they form all sorts of backstories and they get their needs met through it. Again, a classic example, talking about that Dr. Joe was talking about his event. If you're registered disabled and you want to heal, but you still park in the disabled bay, and what mixed messages are you giving? Oh no, I want to keep hold of the perks, but I don't want the ailment. Well, you've got an incongruency there. Your heart and mind aren't going to be aligned, so you won't send out a decent broadcast signal. Yeah. And you've got no power to be able to impact the field with. Now you're back to using matter to matter.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I'm a recovering alcoholic too. I don't drink, and it's a different identity that they've owned.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I mean, back to your original question, what would I recommend? I mean, the starting point for many people in personal growth and development is the classic Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich. If you haven't read that for a while, it's worth rereading because there's some gems in there. He does focus a lot on this sort of desire aspect, because a lot of people coming through, especially in the 1930s, etc., moving forward, and a lot of people on their journey have to come from a sort of to me into by me mentality, and desire is useful at that point. Without desire, nothing really happens. But if desire is consuming you because you have a need that says, I'm less than unless I get something, then you're coming from lack. You're coming from the wrong foundation. If you're driven by desire, and that's why personal growth and development has such a repetitive cycle of people, same people doing the seminar junkie stuff. You've got to have a white hot burning desire. Well, because you need that white hot burning desire to be able to bend Lego bricks into shape, because it's damned hard work, because you don't trust the universe to provide it. So from that basis, Think and Grow Rich also has a high level of spiritual content. And when you peek through the curtain, the entire aspect of understanding, infinite intelligence, which is his words for the field. If you go to a transurfing model with Vadim Zeland, there's another phenomenal model. He'd call it the alternative space, or the space of variations in his early work. There's many different aspects to personal growth that people can find their level on their journey. And ultimately, it's like health at a physical level. If we take away the mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic level of health for a second and just focus on what 99% of the industry focus on, which is on the physical side. The golden rule, listen to your body. Yeah. If grandma takes garlic every night and she swears by it, right, and therefore she's an advocate, should you take garlic? Well, listen to your body. Your body will tell you. So if you say, well, I've got this great book and you should read it, well, that's your projection of your model of the world, and you may be tuned into what you think the person needs, but ultimately it's, they need to tune in for themselves.
I always have this conversation with vegetarians.
I'm a vegetarian, so that's what... Yeah, a bit about
listen to your body when it comes.
But we're going to get into an entirely different podcast on that argument there, are we? Yeah. I was vegetarian. I was actually vegan for a year and a half, because again, you come from the place of ultimately my outcomes. I want to be healthy, and there's so many models out there that you show me one that has the right information. I just want to be healthy. So if you convince me it's eating moths, then I'll eat moths. It's got to that stage for so many people, unfortunately. Again, focusing on the physical rather than the mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic side. But I'm about listening to your body. If vegetarianism works for you, the fact that you're happy and you're in stasis energetically because you're doing something that you think and believe works for you is as important than whatever it is that you're putting materialistically into your mouth. If you're an avid carnivore and that works for you, your belief, the fact that it works, is as important. The fact that you're putting more acid-based than alkaline-based stuff in your body. Right? It's why? Because we're living in the subset. Your attitude towards it is the superset. And to paraphrase something, set rolls downhill.
Thank you very much for your time, Peter. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, your message has really been an inspiration to us, and I'm sure the listeners are going to benefit greatly as well from the work that you do.
My pleasure. And
where can people find you, Peter, if they want to check out your work?
petersage.com is the usual space to go and have a look at. You can download a complimentary copy and chapter of the Inside Track there right now, which is the sort of the how-to manual on how to deal with adversity that I wrote to all of my top-level coaching clients from when I was on my adventure last year. And that presents a fascinating sort of guide on how to deal with stuff in everyday life through a lot of the tools that I was using in that place, and why I could maintain so much happiness in a scenario that a lot of people probably would be struggling in. And I have a lot of my previous teachers to thank for that. It's not because I'm special. I just put a lot of work in over the last 30 years, initially driven to try to prove I was good enough to the world. And that's why I said, desire can be a good thing if it gets people out of the armchair. So I'm petersage.com, and it'd be a pleasure to see you guys again. I think I've got the Sage Business School coming up in a few weeks in February, the next one. So I hope you guys come and support. And it'd be a pleasure to contribute anytime again to the mission that you guys are doing, which is trying to spread the word of good stuff to good people. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
This is mine.